And, I don't know if I've told the story on this show before, but I had a shooting in my high school, but it was a teacher that showed up with a gun and started shooting people. So,
Really? In high school?
yeah. Anytime somebody tells me, arm the teachers, that's the way to stop it. Well, what happens when the teacher goes nuts? Or what happens when you overpower the teacher and take their gun? It's not a good idea. And yeah, I almost got killed that day. It was fucked up.
Let's hear more about this, Steve. Why do you have PTSD? Is that why you've never talked about it?
I've never told you the story even off air before.
No.
Oh wow! I wrote a whole article about it for Lefty Liberal. I'll send it to you. But no, I mean here's the basic story. It was my senior year of high school. It was the week before Christmas break, 1993. And the weird part of the story for me was I had been sick or playing sick or whatever it was one day, and I missed an economics test. And so I came back to school the next day and I went around asking all my friends, like, what was on the economics test? Because I got to stay after school and take it. So everyone kind of told me what was on it. So my economics teacher told me to go to the main administration building after school, take your test. When you're done, put it in my mailbox. I'll grade it the next day, kind of thing. And when I was in the administration building, I noticed my one of our science teachers, Stephen Leith, Mr. Leith, who was this former hippie dude, like long ponytail, the John Lennon glasses. He always wore Converse every day. Like he was a fan
Smelled like
favorite.
patchouli.
Yeah, he was a fan favorite amongst the students because he was this cool old hippie teacher, right, and teaching science nowadays. And he went into the superintendent's office along with the principal and the head of the teachers union, Mr. Jones, who was one of the English teachers. Mr. Piasecki was the superintendent. He was my next door neighbor. And Mr. Mead was the principal. He was also one of my next door neighbors. So I see all four of these guys go into the superintendent's office. I keep doing my test. And about 20 minutes later, Mr. Leith came storming out of that office and walked straight out of the administration building. And I remember thinking it was kind of odd that, he seemed pissed off and, stormed out of the building. I took another 5 or 10 minutes to finish that test, and it should have taken me much longer, but I knew what was on the test, so I was able to breeze through this. So I turned in the test and I left. About 2 minutes after I left, Mr. Leith had driven home, gotten his handgun, and came back, and he shot Mr. Piasecki, Mr. Mead, and Mr. Jones. He killed Mr.
What?
Piasecki,
Yeah.
my next door neighbor, and
I'm
his
looking at
kids
the
were.
I'm looking
Did
at
you
the news
find it?
story right now. Yeah, I did.
I'm citing all the right names and dates and everything, aren't I?
Yes, you are. Yeah, December 16th, 1993. Mr. Piasecki. Yes, I am reading all of it right now as you say
Yeah.
this.
Joseph
Thanks,
Piasecki.
Steve.
You're welcome. His daughter was in my grade. His son was a grade older than me, and he died that day. Mr. Mead and Mr. Jones were both critically shot, but thanks to rushing him off to a hospital, they were able to save him, which is something I always cite about assault weapons versus handguns. An AR-15, when you get a bullet hole, it destroys you.
Yeah.
And so there's almost no medical attention that will save your life. And I learned this from my dad, who is an emergency room doctor. He said that if you get shot with a handgun or a regular rifle, and if you can get to the doctor quick enough, it's a very clean hole. They can probably save you. But an AR-15, for example, just bores out a hole. It's meant to make people bleed out on the battlefield
Yes.
before medical attention
It
can get
bounces
there.
around inside you, dude.
Yes.
It tears you up.
So this was a good articulation of, handguns aren't good per se, but, odds are good. You can probably survive it if you're shot. So, yeah, the two teachers lived. They were horribly, debilitated for a while, lots of recovery and surgeries. But yeah, Mr. Piasecki died that day, and Mr. Leith, went on trial. He tried to claim Prozac, made him temporarily insane and all this stuff. And
What did he say? I mean, why did he do it? Did he get pissed off at these three individuals?
A student accused him of doing something sexually inappropriate, and we
Yeah.
have never really found out if that was true or not because he never
Inappropriate comments to as a female student, it says.
yeah, and he was never investigated for it because he was put on trial for murder. So he eventually was found guilty and is spending the rest of his life in jail. And his wife, Mrs. Leith, Alice, she was a teacher at the school as well, and she became a bit of a pariah, having her husband, shooting at the school.
Sure.
She ended
Take
up
me
getting
back
cancer.
were had you left the property?
No. I mean, I was probably pulling out of the parking lot as this was happening because I
Okay.
got home like 10 minutes later and my phone started ringing at the house, like landline on the kitchen wall thing. And it was my sister they're saying there was a shooting at the high school. Like, what's going on? I was like, I was just there. Like, there was no shooting at the high school. But In hindsight, that is what happened. I left, he came back in the building, he shot everyone, and it would have been, at a minimum, I would have watched it all happen. It would have happened right there in front of me. And would he have shot me? I have no idea. That's the big thing that's always haunted me. Would he have shot a student or not? I don't know.
Would you have tackled him, dude? Maybe you would have done something. Maybe you would have reacted. Who knows?
Great question. It's one of those you can hypothesize what you may have done in that situation, but
Sure.
I would imagine I would have ducked under a desk. But yeah, who knows, man? Who knows if he would have shot me or if I would have witnessed the whole thing? I would have. And here's the other funny thing, quote unquote. The next day was the last day before Christmas break, and they wanted all the students to come back to school. When I showed up to school, there was news media all over the front lawn of our high school, like a spectacle you see in movies, all the news trucks and reporters trying to talk to students. And they had called in dozens of grief counselors. So each classroom had a grief counselor, and that's why they wanted all the students to come back. And my economics teacher knew that I was in the administration building because it was his test that I was staying to take.
Right.
He found me that morning and he pulled me aside. He was just like, "Oh my gosh, I've been worried about you all night long. Like, what happened? What did you see?" And I told him my side of the story. And I asked him, I said, "Should I go to the police and tell them I was there, that I saw everyone go into the building together and I saw him storm out of the building?" And he looked at me dead serious and he said, "Don't ever tell anyone. Like, you're going to end up testifying in trial. You're going to have to do police reports. Like, you didn't see the actual shooting. So I would go home and talk to your parents about this, but my advice would be just pretend you were not there." And that's exactly what I did.
Did this fuck you up mentally for a while?
When it happened at the time, it was a huge deal to everyone in that community, but I don't recall being super rattled. But as life has gone on, and as I think back about that day and what could have happened, whether I witnessed it or was shot myself, like it stuck with me. And it's formed a lot of my opinions about handguns versus rifles and about army teachers and all that kind of stuff. So
How many people were in that school, dude? How big was your school?
my class was 100-something people. So the whole school.
You knew everybody.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
all grew up together. It was a
Yeah.
small town community. I mean, very few people moved away or moved into the town. So the whole school was probably 500 people. And yeah, everyone knew everyone. And yeah, his wife ended up getting cancer and dying.
Yep. She died 2 years to the day of the shootings.
Brewski?
I like the Brewskis fact checking me, and then I'm getting this all right.
No. I'm just happening
We
to read it.
obviously need it on this program.
Apparently, no, Brewski. I like that you're confirming it. Like, my memory's holding up. And I'll tell you a really sad story. I delivered for Cottage Inn Pizza back in those days, and Alice Leith, she got some form of cancer, and it aged her. The chemotherapy and all that stuff just aged her rapidly. Like, she had gray hair, she put on all this weight and had jowls. And I delivered a pizza to her house one day. And we did the whole interaction, here's your pizza, it's whatever it cost. And as I'm walking away, she says, "Steve, like, do you not want to talk to me because of what my husband did?" And I turned around, I was like, "Mrs. Leith, like, I didn't even know that was you. Like, I'm sorry." Like, she went off the deep end just physically from this cancer she had. And I would have to think that the stress of what she went through had something to do with that, cancer kicking in like it did.
Yeah.
She
Sure.
just withered away and and passed away. So, and she was one of my favorites. They both were favorite teachers in the school.
I don't want to say this as a fact, but I have been told this by doctors is that if you hold on to stress inside of you and pain and stress inside of you,
Yeah.
that it can create cancer, or it can take your immune system down far enough that your cancer can take over your body.
I think that's what it primarily is. Your immune system just takes a shit, and things can then sneak in on you. So,
Yeah.
screwed up story. And Brewski, I bet the article you're looking at is a scan or something, right? Because this was pre-internet.
No, actually, this is an article from Miss M Live, actually, and it's
Okay.
yeah.
They must have written it over, because when I searched
They-
this
they-
on the internet years ago, I could only find basically a photocopy of a news story.
Yeah, it was updated April 11th, 2013, and then I thought you might find it interesting.
Yeah.
What Mr. Leith is doing in prison right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it says, "Get ready to roll your eyes."
Oh boy. Is he a Trump supporter?
Most days he rises at 5:30 a.m., showers, meditates, and prays until breakfast at 7. He walks in the prison yard and then tutors other inmates from 1 to 4 p.m. He writes Christian songs, plays guitar and piano, and leads music during Sunday services. Give me a fucking break.
Right.
It's wonderful.
I can't imagine that guy was religious back in the day because he was such
No.
a liberal hippie. So that's, probably the result of
And
prison
then-
life and years of guilt and all that.
Well, and you asked about arming teachers.
Yeah.
Well, they asked him about arming teachers.
Yeah.
And this is a direct quote from him. It says, "You're asking me to think about things I've never thought about before. I guess I'm a little hesitant unless those persons are trained in using a firearm and deciding wisely when to use it."
Yeah.
End quote.
Well, think about this. If he only had to walk to his classroom to get a gun,
Yeah.
I definitely would have been there for it. The fact that he had to drive to his house and back is the only thing that got me out of there.
Well, and he had more than one gun too. He had a collection of them, including an AK-47.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I've also
that's-
always had the theory that so there's a metal detector at the school, but I know a teacher is armed. So I'm just going to walk in your school unarmed, go up to your English teacher, punch him in the fucking face, and take their gun from them.
Yeah.
So I don't think just putting guns in schools is going to be an inherently good idea. Maybe 1 out of 10 it works out or something. But, and by the way, most of your average teachers do not want that burden of firearm training and knowing they may have to shoot a parent, another student, another teacher. Like that's not part of your academia curriculum when you're a teacher, firearms.
People think that teachers are underpaid now. I mean, we got to
Right.
pay them even more if they're doing that, right?
And again,
Yeah.
the Uvalde cops in body armor, assault weapons, they were going, I don't want to get shot. But
And-
you're going to trust the science teacher, huh?
Well, and also those folks go through crazy amounts of training. I mean, there were specialized units there that are just there, that are SWAT units,
Yes,
and
and
they
have
didn't go
backup.
in.
Right, exactly. I know that every now and again there's a story of a good guy with a gun that stops, somebody, but there's way more where that backfires on you, literally or figuratively.
And I
there
think
was
as we
go ahead.
learned today, you need a drag queen to save you.
Right, exactly. I remember there's a story a couple of years ago, and I couldn't tell you which public shooting it was because they all blend together in my mind. But they interviewed a black guy that was in this mall when a shooting happened, and he had a concealed weapon on him. And he said, do you think I was going to take my gun out and come running out of this building, a black guy with a gun while a public shooting was going on? He's like, I'd be dead in a
no.
heartbeat. And he's totally right, by the way.
Yeah.
How do the cops know who the shooter is and who the good guy with the gun is when they bust into a school or a mall or a movie theater?
They don't.
No, you're putting a target on your own head running around with a gun during that. So it's a terrible situation. And statistically speaking, I hope I've had my public shooting experience, but we're all going to have one. My kids will, you will. Statistically speaking, you'll be lucky if you don't.